Welcome back, dear viewers. So, in today's session, let us discuss about the features of the midbrain. So, midbrain, it is a part of the brainstem. It is the shortest part of the brainstem. So, this midbrain, it connects the forebrain with the hindbrain, and it is the forms the upper part of the brainstem. As you know, it is this is the midbrain, pons, and medulla. So, it forms the upper part of the brainstem. Coming to its dimensions, this midbrain, it is about 2.5 centimeters in its length and 2.5 centimeters in its width. So in today's session, we will be discussing in detail about the external features as well as the internal features of the midbrain. So when we discuss about the external features, we will discuss it under two headings. That is the under the two surfaces, that is the ventral view, which is being shown over here, and this is the dorsal view of the midbrain. So what do you see in the ventral view? You see two crus cerebri. So these are the two crus cerebri. What are these crus cerebri? These are the fibers, the white fibers from the cerebral cortex which run to the pons and which run to the medulla and to the cranial nerve nuclei. All will pass through this crus cerebri. These crus cerebri, you see, they are converging at the upper part of the pons in order to enter into the pons. And you can see two cranial nerves are emerging from either side of the crus cerebri. So one is from the medial side and the other one is from the lateral side. So we know the third and fourth cranial nerves are in relation to the midbrain. So medialmost is the oculomotor nerve or the third cranial nerve, and the one which is coming out from the lateral surface of the crus cerebri is the fourth cranial nerve or the trochlear nerve. So what are the relations of this crus cerebri? From above to below, if we see, it is being crossed over by the optic tract in its upper end, and then if you remember, the two vertebral arteries will unite to form the basilar artery, which will pass in the basilar groove, and it gives out one branch at the upper border of pons, that is superior cerebellar artery. This is superior cerebellar artery. And then later on, it will finally terminate as the two posterior cerebral arteries. So from above downwards, the structures which cross over this crus cerebri are, first one is the optic tract. Then you can see this is the posterior cerebral artery, and then in the inferior most part you have got the superior cerebellar artery, and there is one more structure which is called as tinea pontis. That is nothing but a white fibers, okay, which are present here. So these are the relations on the ventral surface of the crus cerebri. And the nerves which are emerging from the midbrain are the third and fourth cranial nerves. So these are in relation to the ventral surface of the crus cerebri. Now if you see carefully, the two crus cerebri, as I told you, they are converging in order to enter into the upper border of the pons while carrying all the white fibers which come from the cortex. So they form the lateral, infrolateral boundaries of the interpeduncular fossa. So in between the two cerebral peduncles, we have got the interpeduncular fossa. So these will form the infrolateral boundaries of the interpeduncular fossa. Okay. So this is about the features you see in the ventral view of the midbrain. So when we look at the dorsal view, so this is the posterior view. So you can see four bodies, okay, which are the conspicuous feature which is seen in the dorsal view. So these four bodies together, they are referred to as corpora quadrigemina. Corpora means body, quadrigemina means four. Because these are four in number, we are referring to them as corpora quadrigemina, and they are separated by a cruciate sulcus. or a cruciform sulcus, a plus-shaped sulcus which is separating these four bodies. So what are these four bodies? So the two bodies above, they are called as superior colliculus, and the bodies which are present below, they are called as inferior colliculus. So the superior colliculus, they are 2 in number, inferior colliculus, they are 2 in number. So these four together, they are referred to as corpora quadrigemna. So these are the four bodies which are seen in the dorsal view of the midbrain, which form the corpora quadrigemna. Now what have these to do? This superior colliculus, it is related with vision, and this inferior colliculus, it is related with the audition. Okay, so auditory pathway. So this superior colliculus, if you see, it is having an extension. The fibers from the superior colliculus, they form the upper brachium. Brachium means arm. Okay, so upper brachium, and these will terminate in the lateral geniculate body. And from the inferior colliculus, the fibers which arise, they will form the inferior or the lower brachium, which will finally terminate in the medial geniculate body. So as I told you, this superior colliculus is related with the vision, and inferior colliculus is related with the auditory pathway. So all the fibers in the visual pathway, they pass through the superior colliculus, and through the upper brachium, they will enter into the lateral geniculate body, and from the inferior colliculus through the lower brachium, they will enter into the medial geniculate body, and these are concerned with the auditory pathway, and this is concerned with the visual pathway. So these are the features you see in the dorsal view of the midbrain. So I told you there is one sulcus, plus shaped sulcus, which we are referring it to as the cruciform sulcus. So this is the cruciform sulcus which is separating these four bodies, that is the corpora quadrigemna. So now if you trace this sulcus upwards, it will end in a depression which will lodge the pineal body. So this is the place which will lodge the pineal body. Now if you trace this cruciform sulcus downwards, it will end in frenulum veni. Frenulum villi. Okay. So at this point of frenulum villi, you see the trochlear nerve is emerging out. Okay. So actually trochlear nerve is the only cranial nerve which will emerge from the dorsal aspect of the brainstem. Remaining all cranial nerves we have seen, they are emerging from the ventral aspect of the brainstem. So it is after it emerges from the dorsal aspect of the brainstem, then again it will come anteriorly, and it will come out from the lateral aspect of the crus cerebri as shown in this figure. Okay. So these are the features which we see in the dorsal view of the midbrain. Now this will complete the external features of the midbrain. So now we will take different sections in order to study the midbrain internal structure. Now let us study the internal structure of the midbrain. So in order to study about the internal structure of the midbrain, we will take sections at two different levels. So one is at the level of lower level, that is at the level of inferior colliculus. So at this level, and the other one is at the upper level, that is at the level of superior colliculus. So first we will study the section at the level of inferior colliculus. So this is the section at the level of inferior colliculus. So what do we see? What do we see here? So you see, this is the central gray matter, and you can see one small opening in the center. So this one is called as aqueduct of sylvius. Or otherwise it is also referred to as the cerebral aqueduct. So this is the one which will connect the third ventricle with the fourth ventricle. Okay. So for the ease of description, we will divide the total internal structure of midbrain into parts. So how do we divide? So we will just draw one imaginary line which will pass through the center of this cerebral aqueduct. So when we draw one imaginary line, you can see the interior is being divided into one small dorsal part. This one is the small dorsal part behind this imaginary line, and a large ventral part. This small dorsal part is referred to as tectum. So this is the tectum. Next, the ventral part, which is there in front of this imaginary line, this is called as cerebral peduncle. So now this cerebral peduncle is divisible into three different parts from dorsal to anterior. So you can see this part is called as tegmentum. And you can see one shaded area. This is called as substantia nigra. And the most anterior or the ventral part is called as crus cerebri. So we are just drawing one imaginary line which is passing through the aqueduct of sylvius or the cerebral aqueduct. So the part posterior or dorsal to that, we are calling it as tectum, and the part which is ventral to the imaginary line is totally called as the cerebral peduncle. Now this cerebral peduncle, again it is having subdivisions. So from dorsal to ventral, this part is called as the tegmentum, and this pigmented part is called as substantia nigra, and this part is called as the crus cerebri. So these are the parts of the cerebral peduncle. So I told you we are taking sections at two levels, at the level of inferior colliculus, and this is at the level of superior colliculus. So wherever be the level, the features in the crus cerebrum and substantia nigra are the same. So if you have a look at these two diagrams, these features are almost the same. They are not changing. Only the changes which take place are taking place in the tegmental part and the tectal part. So first we will discuss what are the features which are present in the crus cerebri and the substantia nigra, which is same in both the sections. So if you take the crus cerebri. So this is the crus cerebri, which forms the ventralmost part of the cerebral peduncle. So it is made up of the fibers which run from cortex. So what are those fibers? Those are the corticonuclear fibers, corticospinal fibers, corticopontine fibers. So this corticonuclear fibers from the cortex to the cranial nerve nuclei, and this corticospinal fibers from cortex to the spinal cord, and corticopontine fibers, they run from cerebral cortex to the pontine nuclei. So these are the fibers which are running from cortex, all the descending tracts. So these descending tracts, they are present within this crus cerebri. So how are they located? So this corticonuclear and corticospinal together, they will form the pyramidal tract. Okay. So now we will divide the crus cerebri into three parts. So middle 2/3, medial 1/6 and lateral 1/6 part. Okay. So total. So in the middle 2/3, so this is the middle 2/3 part. This middle 2/3 part is occupied by the corticonuclear fibers and the corticospinal fibers. Okay. So the corticonuclear fibers and corticospinal tract fibers, they are located within the middle 2/3. So what about this medial 1/6? So we have the remaining is corticopontine fibers. Now corticopontine fibers, they are again divisible into 4 different types. You know, cerebral cortex has got 4 lobes. From the frontal lobe to pons is frontopontine fibers. From the temporal lobe we say temporopontine fibers. From the parietal lobe we call them as parietopontine fibers, and from the occipital lobe occipitopontine fibers. So these are 4 different types. Of this, the frontopontine fibers which are there, they are run through the medial 1/6 frontopontine fibers, and the remaining 3, these 3, they will run in the lateral 1/6 part of the crus cerebri. So you can remember it like pot, or you can remember it like top, whichever way. Parieto-pontine, occipitopontine and temporopontine. Anyway, PTO. So anyway, so those are the fibers which are present in the lateral 1/6. So I repeat, this is the crus cerebri which forms the ventralmost part of the section. So in this, it is again divisible into medial 1/6 part, middle 2/3 part and a lateral 1/6 part. In the middle 2/3, we see the descending tracts. Those are the corticonuclear fibers and the corticospinal tract fibers. In the medial 1/6 part, you can see the frontopontine fibers from the frontal lobe to the pontine nuclei. And in the lateral 1/6 part, you can see the parietopontine, occipitopontine and the temporopontine fibers running through the lateral 1/6 part. So let it be a section at the inferior colliculus or superior colliculus level. The crus cerebri structure will remain the same. It is the same here also. Middle 2/3, same fibers will pass through lateral 1/6 and medial 1/6. So it is the same. And next, moving on, this pigmented area. So that we have called it as substantia nigra. So why is it pigmented? So this is pigmented because of the presence of a pigment which is called as melanin. And of course, it also contains iron. So because of the presence of melanin and iron, so this is pigmented. It is seen like a grayish black structure. So this melanin, it is a polymerized form of a substance which is called as dopamine. So the dopamine secretion is formed here. Okay, it is formed, the dopamine is found within the substantia nigra. After being formed here, it is carried through the axons to the corpus striatum. So this forms the part of the basal ganglia. Okay. So from here, from the midbrain, the substantia nigra of the midbrain, the dopamine is being synthesized, and through the axons, it is being carried to the corpus striatum through a pathway which is called as nigrostriatal pathway. So substantia nigra to corpus striatum. So substantia nigra to corpus striatum. So that is why it is called as nigrostriatal pathway. So this is the important source for formation of the dopamine. So in some cases where there is a reduced formation of this dopamine, it leads to a clinical condition which is referred to as Parkinsonism. Parkinsonism. So this is due to the depletion of the dopamine secretion at the substantia nigra level. Okay. So now what are the features you see in this substantia nigra? So this substantia nigra, it is a large motor nucleus. Okay. It is a large motor nucleus which is present in between the crus cerebri and the tegmentum part of the midbrain. So it is pigmented due to the presence of melanin and iron. So this, if you see, it is broad medially and it is narrow laterally. In comparison to the medial part, it is narrowed laterally. And then if you see dorsally, it presents a smooth curve. It will present a smooth curve. And ventrally, it is showing spikes. So it is spiked in its ventral aspect and it is smooth and concave in its dorsal aspect. And basing on the number of cells in this substantia nigra, it is divisible into two parts. So those two parts are called as pars compacta, that is the dorsal part, and pars reticularis, that is the ventral part. This pars reticularis will contain less number of cells and it will merge with the fibers of the crus cerebri. So these are the two parts of the substantia nigra. So the structure of the substantia nigra in this section and this section will remain the same. So because these two are the substantia nigra and crus cerebri have got a common features, so we have discussed the common features first. Now we will see what are the features in the tegmentum and tectum which are differing in the level of inferior colliculus and at the level of superior colliculus. So initially we will study the section at the level of inferior colliculus. So whatever structures are differing, they are differing at the tegmentum and the tectal level only. Okay. So this is the section of the level of inferior colliculus. So we will describe what is there in the grey matter and then we will discuss what is there in the white matter. You can see this is the central grey matter and this is one cranial nerve which is emerging out. So the cranial nerve nucleus which is associated at the level of inferior colliculus is the fourth cranial nerve nucleus. So that is trochlear nerve nucleus. So this is the trochlear nerve nucleus which is located in the ventral part of the central grey matter. You can see one more nucleus which is present over here, that is the mesencephalic nucleus of the trigeminal nerve. So this is the mesencephalic nucleus of trigeminal nerve and this is the trochlear nerve nucleus. So actually till now when we have seen the sections of the brainstem, we said the midbrain is related to the third and fourth. We said the pons is related to the middle four, that is 5, 6, 7 and 8 cranial nerves, and we said the medulla is related to the last 4 cranial nerves, that is 9, 10, 11 and 12. But we have seen these cranial nerve nuclei, they are restricted to that level. So like if we take a section of the pons at the upper level, we see only the trigeminal nerve nucleus, and if we take the section of pons at the lower level, we see only the 6, 7 and 8 cranial nerve nucleus. But there is only one exception, that is the trigeminal nerve. So the nucleus of the trigeminal nerve, they are present throughout the brainstem. But the remaining nuclei, they are restricted to the place from where they emerge. Okay. So that is a point to be remembered. Only the nuclei of the trigeminal nerve, they are distributed throughout the brainstem. So this is the mesencephalic nucleus of trigeminal nerve, and you have got one more nucleus, that is the trochlear nucleus of trochlear nerve nucleus. And then you see one more nucleus in this part. So that is the nucleus of inferior colliculus. This is the nucleus of inferior colliculus. Okay. So these are the grey matter which are present. So now you see the trochlear nerve which is emerging from this trochlear nerve nucleus. It is passing dorsally, dorsolaterally, and it is passing around the central grey matter. It is decussating and it is emerging out. So this is the only cranial nerve which is emerging from the dorsal aspect of the brainstem. So it is emerging out from the dorsal aspect. After emerging from the dorsal aspect, it will pass through the lateral aspect of the tegmentum, and then when it reaches the crus cerebri, it is exit outside. Okay, so that is what is being shown here. Here, this part. It is exiting from the lateral aspect of the crus cerebri. Okay, so these two cranial nerves, they are exactly located in between the posterior cerebral artery and superior cerebellar artery, junction between the posterior cerebral artery and superior cerebellar artery. So it will exit out from the lateral aspect of the crus cerebri, which is being shown over here. Actually, so it is actually emerging from the dorsal aspect and finally it is coming to the ventral aspect like this. So these are the grey matter which are present at the level of inferior colliculus. Now what about the white matter? So when we mean white matter, we refer to all the tracts which are present. So you see, this is the lateral lemniscus. In the previous section of pons, we have seen the lemnisci, they are arranged in a transverse manner. But here if you see, they are arranged in a circular manner from late towards the dorsolateral aspect. So what are the lemnisci you see? So this is the medial lemniscus, this is the trigeminal lemniscus, this is the spinal lemniscus, and this is the lateral lemniscus. You see, this lateral lemniscus is terminating into the inferior colliculus. Okay, so why? I told you the lateral lemniscus is related to the auditory pathway. So the lateral lemniscus, the fibers from the lateral lemniscus, they enter into the inferior colliculus, and from the inferior colliculus, I told you, by means of the inferior brachium, they will enter into the medial geniculate body in order to reach the auditory cortex. So the lateral lemniscus is entering into the inferior colliculus. And then what are the other features you see in the central position? So this is the central position. So you see the medial longitudinal fasciculus. This is the medial longitudinal fasciculus, which is located just ventral to the trochlear nerve nucleus. Okay, and then you have got the tectospinal tract, which is present ventral to the medial longitudinal fasciculus, and here you can see one important decussation which forms a feature at this level. So the most important feature which we see at the level of the inferior colliculus is this decussation. Okay, so this is called as decussation of the superior cerebellar peduncle. So crossing over the fibers which come from the superior cerebellar peduncle. So this is the decussation. So from dorsal to ventral, if you see, you have got the medial longitudinal fasciculus. Then ventral to that you have got the tectospinal tract. Ventral to that you have got the decussation of the superior cerebellar peduncle, and even more ventral to that you have got the rubrospinal tract. So this decussation of the superior cerebellar peduncle is an important feature which we see at the level of the section of midbrain and the level of inferior colliculus. And the lemniscus, they are spread in a dorsolateral aspect. So this is the medial lemniscus, trigeminal lemniscus, spinal lemniscus, and lateral lemniscus. The lateral lemniscus is entering into the inferior colliculus, and one more cranial nerve nucleus which you are seeing is the mesencephalic nucleus of the trigeminal nerve, and this is the reticular formation. So these are the features you see in the section of the midbrain at the level of inferior colliculus. Now let's move on to the section at the level of superior colliculus. So this is the section at the level of superior colliculus. So as we discussed earlier, the features of the crus cerebri and the substantia nigra will remain the same. Only the tegmentum part and tectum part will change. So what are the features you see in this tegmentum and the tectum part? So initially we will discuss it like the grey matter and the white matter. So what are all the nuclei we are seeing? So in the central grey matter, so this is the central grey matter. So this is the mesencephalic nucleus of trigeminal nerve. Okay, so this is remaining in the same position, it is not changing its position. And then in the ventral part of the central grey matter, you see two nuclei which are uniting in the midline, and they almost form a triangular outline. So there are two nuclei like this, and they are uniting together in the midline. So they are almost forming a triangular outline, this one. So that is the oculomotor nerve, oculomotor nuclear complex. So this oculomotor nuclear complex will also have one more nucleus within it, which is called as Edinger-Westphal nucleus. So the fibers from this Edinger-Westphal nucleus will supply the ciliaris muscle and the sphincter pupillae, and the extraocular muscles will be being supplied by this oculomotor nuclear complex. So this is the oculomotor nuclear complex, which has the oculomotor nerve nucleus as well as Edinger-Westphal nucleus. And you can see in its anterior ventrolateral aspect, you can see the medial longitudinal fasciculus which was there separately. Now it is involved in this central gray matter. Okay, so it will merge with this oculomotor nuclear complex. So that is the difference which we can make out. And then you can see the oculomotor nerve which is emerging out. So while emerging out, it will pass ventrally and laterally first, and it passes through the red nucleus, and then it passes through the medial part of the substantia nigra, and it exits out through the medial part of the crus cerebri. So it comes out from the medial medial part of the crus cerebri. So I told you it emerges in the junction between the posterior cerebral artery and the superior cerebellar artery. So that is how the oculomotor nerve is emerging out. So any other nuclei which we are able to see? Yes. So this is the superior nucleus of the superior colliculus. So this is the nucleus of superior colliculus. So what is this? From where does this get its afferents? And from where afferents means from the fibers will come to the superior colliculus from the other levels. So it will get its afferents from retina, from the inferior colliculus, from the spinal cord, and from the cerebral cortex. So which lobes of cerebral cortex? Frontal and occipital lobe. Frontal and occipital lobe. So as I told you earlier, the superior colliculus, it is connected with the superior brachium, through which it will enter into the lateral geniculate body, and it is related with the optic pathway. So the areas of the cerebral cortex related to the conjugate eye movements are present in the frontal and occipital lobe. So that is why the superior colliculus will receive its afferents from these four areas: from the retina, from the inferior colliculus, from the spinal cord, and from the frontal lobe and occipital lobe of the cerebral cortex. So from where the efferent fibers will go, that means the fibers which arise from the superior colliculus, where do they go? So important efferents. So they go to the spinal cord and they go to the medulla. So they form the tectospinal tract and they form the tectobulbar tract. Okay, fibers which go to spinal cord are tectospinal, which go to the medulla are tectobulbar. So these are the main efferents which go from the superior colliculus. Okay, so this is about the superior colliculus, the afferents, and these are the afferents and these are the efferents. So this tectospinal and this tectobulbar which are there, they are related to the movement of the head and neck with visual stimulus. So the reflexes are from this because of these two tracts. When you move your head and neck with the eye movements and towards the visual stimulus is because of these two tracts, tectospinal and the tectobulbar tract. And any other grey matter nuclei which we are able to see at this level? Yes, there is one more. This one. So that is the red nucleus. So red nucleus is present in the midbrain at the level of the superior colliculus. So why it is called as red nucleus? It is called as red nucleus basing on its appearance. So why is it red? So when you take a freshly cut specimen, due to the increased vascularity, it will look red, and due to the presence of iron, okay, and increased vascularity. So that will impart a red color. So that is how it gets its name as red nucleus. So from where does this red nucleus get its afferents? So the connections of the red nucleus. So the afferents for the red nucleus. So they come from the cerebrum, cerebellum and globus pallidus. Just remember the names. Okay, so the afferents will come from the cerebrum, cerebellum and globus pallidus. So because it is red, we say rubro, okay. Next, from where the efferents will go. Efferents will go to the spinal cord, efferents will go to the medulla, efferents will go to the reticular formation, okay. So these are a few which I have mentioned. So from red nucleus to spinal cord, we say rubrospinal, okay. From red nucleus to medulla, rubrobulbar. So that is so. So these are the few of the afferents which enter the red nucleus, and these are the efferents which leave from the red nucleus. So this is described like a cigar shaped gray matter which is present in the ventral aspect of the midbrain at the level of superior colliculus in the tegmental part, okay. So it is present just dorsal to the medial end of the substantia nigra. And then this is about the gray matter, is it? Yes? Yes, we are able to see one more nucleus over here. One more nucleus. So this is called as pretectal nucleus. Pretectal nucleus. Now what is this pretectal nucleus? So because it is present in front of the tectum. So we have described this posterior part of the midbrain as the tectum. So just before that, because it is present just in front of the tectum, we are calling it as pretectal nucleus. So this pretectal nucleus, it will get its afferents from the optic pathway, okay, from the optic tract through the pretectal nucleus, and from here they will go to the Edinger-Westphal nucleus of the same side as well as the opposite side. So what is the important function of this pretectal nucleus? So this is responsible for the direct light reflex, pupillary reflex, what we call it as, and consensual light reflex. So that means because it is going to the Edinger-Westphal nucleus of the same side and opposite side. So if you put a light in the eye, you see the light reflex in the same in the eye which you have focused the light, and the opposite eye also will contract. So that is called as the consensual light reflex. Okay. So there is one specific syndrome where this pretectal nucleus is involved. So that is called as Argyll-Robertson pupil. So what will happen in this Argyll-Robertson pupil? The light reflex is lost, but the accommodation reflex will be present. So this is due to the damage of the pretectal nucleus. So that is about the grey matter which is present at the level of superior colliculus. Now what about the tracts which are present? So these are the tracts which are present. So this is the medial lemniscus, okay, and this is the trigeminal lemniscus. This is the spinal lemniscus. And in this level, we cannot see the lateral lemniscus because it is entering into the inferior colliculus. So we cannot see the lateral lemniscus anymore over here. But in the central part, in the median plane, you can see two decussations. So what are those? So this is the dorsal decussation. And this is the ventral decussation. So dorsal decussation is also called as dorsal tegmental decussation of Maynard. And ventral decussation is called as ventral decussation of Forel. So Forel's decussation and Maynard's decussation. So how are these decussations formed? So you know the fibers from the red nucleus will enter into the spinal cord. They will form the rubrospinal tract. So the fibers from the red nucleus, they will decussate with each other in the anterior, that is the ventral aspect, and they will form the ventral decussation of Forel. So that is due to the decussation of the fibers of the rubrospinal tract. And what about this? The fibers from the superior colliculus. So the tectospinal tract which are there, so they will decussate in the midline. The tectospinal tract fibers. So those will form the dorsal decussation of Maynard. Here we have seen them as individual bundles of nerve fibers, but here they are decussating with each other before they form this bundle. Okay, so that is the decussation which we are seeing over. Decussation means crossing over, and these are the reticular formation. So now we'll just review all the features which are present in the level of the superior colliculus. So we have seen the central gray matter which has got the oculomotor nuclear complex, that is oculomotor nerve with the Edinger-Westphal nerve, and ventrolateral to that you can see the medial longitudinal fasciculus, and in the lateral part of the gray matter you can see the mesencephalic nucleus of the trigeminal nerve, and in the dorsal tectal part you can see the nucleus of the superior colliculus, and in the tegmental part you can see the red nucleus. Okay, so these are the various nuclei present at this level, and one more important nucleus is the pretectal nucleus which is concerned with the light reflex. And then the fibers which are present, you can see the medial lemniscus, you can see the trigeminal lemniscus and the spinal lemniscus. We cannot see the lateral lemniscus because it has entered into the inferior colliculus, and you see the two decussations in the midline. So this is dorsal decussation of Maynard, okay, which is formed by the decussation of the fibers of the tectospinal tract, and this is the ventral decussation of Forel, which is formed by the decussation of the fibers of the rubrospinal tract. So that is the fibers coming from the red nucleus. And we have seen the features in the substantia nigra and the crus cerebri are same, one and the same in the section at the level of inferior colliculus as well as at the section of superior colliculus. Now, what is the blood supply of this midbrain? This midbrain is actually supplied by these two arteries. I told you the branches of the basilar artery. So it is being supplied by the posterior cerebral artery, and it is being supplied by the superior cerebellar artery. And apart from this, it is also being supplied by the posterior communicating artery and the choroidal arteries as well. Okay, so that is about the blood supply of the midbrain. So in my next video, we will just have a look at what are all the clinical features in relation to this